change the world, you're going to have to piss some people off along the way. If you buy into this, our first presenter changes the world multiple times per day. He's the host of Student Affairs Live on higheredlive.com and a nationally recognized thought leader, blogger, and consultant on all things higher education and social media. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the arena, Eric Stoller. All right, you got to open every talk with a little bit of Skrillex, right? A little bit of Peter Pan, you got to get into that. So I love this. I need a catwalk. I asked for one on my writer, and all I got was a marshmallow gun. So I was trying. So thanks to the mats, I got a couple mats back there because I require 2 mats, right? Not just one. So, wow, I'm going to do my best to sort of circle around here because I know we got folks behind me right now, which is really weird because I'm making eye contact with you while they're looking at my butt. So, my life, let me tell you a little bit about it. It's okay, it's fine. My life has been kind of a series of fortunate accidents. Matt was saying that I piss people off all the time. Well, in my life, the only thing that was sort of intentional was that my parents had sex. Everything else kind of accidental, didn't really plan it. Some of you are like thinking, I don't want to think about Eric's parents this early in the morning, maybe after lunch, but not right now. So, another accident that happened, it's MLK Day, right? It's January, and I have to write this blog post for Inside Higher Ed. It's the end of the day, I'm on a deadline, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to write? Oh, and by the way, I got to swear a little bit because Dana Steele might swear later, and so I got to grease the wheels. So I might just drop some F-bombs radically, just put them in there. So I'm writing a blog post for Inside Higher Ed, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell am I going to write about? All right, I'm going to write about justice. I'm going to write about radical student affairs, because no one's really writing about radical student affairs. So I say, okay, I'm going to write this blog post. I ask, where are the radical student affairs practitioners? 62 comments later, 5 phone calls, lots of emails. I got tons of pushback, tons of people asking me things like, you're not old enough to talk about that. You're too old to talk about that. You were an academic advisor. You don't count in student affairs. You're a consultant. You don't get to rock the boat. Or you're a consultant. You get to rock the boat. So I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is going on with this thing, right? I talk about radical, and people just go ballistic. So I'm going to make it into a talk. Because on the comments of that post, I never responded. I never defined what radical meant. And guess what? I'm still not going to define it necessarily, but I'm going to put some ideas out there that I think will lead off this event. So I'm going to do radical plus social media. Right? Ooh, some of you are thinking, oh my God, it's another social media talk. Well, I'll try to make it cool. So let me tell you, on social media, we post a lot of stuff that doesn't really get me jazzed. But the cool thing about radical plus social media plus student affairs is we get to engage in critical thinking. Right? We think about things far deeper and far in a critical sense than we ever did before. So think about it that way, right? Twitter allows us to think critically, to do things in a way that we've never done before from that critical sense. We also get to provoke on Twitter. We get to sort of poke the box, right? Get people going. Ask some questions that are tough. Ask people things that they haven't thought about before. Also, this is my homage to Banksy. The other thing is, Matt mentioned this isn't a safe room, and I love that. This is one of my favorite quotes from Bell Hooks. If you got any Bell Hooks fans in the room, please feel free to scream and shout. Because Bell is awesome, and one of the things that she says that I really love is that the presence of conflict isn't necessarily negative. Right? Because in student affairs, we got a bunch of student affairs folks in the room. How many student affairs people we got in the room, right? Woo! We're all about feeling safe, right? Warm, fluffy, fuzzy bunnies. But we don't always have to feel safe to learn. Because you know what with social media? Social media creates a community of folks just like yourselves where you can be out there and be radical and not necessarily feel safe all the time. Because you got this really cool community to help lift you up and connect with. Because you know what? Social's about love, right? You came to this event because you want to meet some people, but social media, you know what's really radical? Love is radical, folks. Love is radical. In 2012, love is still radical to this day. I love the fact that with social we get to ask questions, right? Who said we can't be innovative? Who said we can't ask questions like, where are the radical folks in our profession, in our field? Because we get to ask questions, right? Someone said, you can't ask questions, you can't ask why. That's challenging people. That's challenging people? Why can't we challenge people, right? Challenge me, challenge each other, ask questions. Because if you can't ask questions, you can't have dreams. And if you can't have dreams, man, that's boring. That is so boring to me. So you know what? You got to push. We got to push. We got to innovate. Who in here says they want to innovate on a daily basis? Who wants to innovate? Who wants to be innovative? Right? And sometimes when you want to be innovative, you got to push, right? And you might have to pull a little bit. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Any grad students in the room? Yeah. Love my grad student peeps, because guess what? You're the future. And you're cultivating this sense of innovation all the time, and guess what? We're not going to take it away from you once you get into the real world. Think about that. Because I don't want you to be boring. I'm so tired of boring. Who else is tired of being boring, right? Like, boring stuff on social media drives me bonkers, right? Top 10 reasons for this, 5 reasons why you should do that. No, let's ask questions, let's provoke, let's talk about critical thinking, critical awareness. Let's look at mirrors and say, I'm not afraid to ask questions of others and of myself. Nothing sucks more than being boring. Who wants to be boring? Nobody. Right? Nobody wants to be boring. That's why you're here in this room with freaking marshmallow guns. Love that. Ken Elmore, I know, there, I said it, I kind of snuck it in there. Ken Elmore, Dean of Students at Boston University, great pal of mine. He was asked, what advice do you have for the graduating class? And Ken, in all his wisdom and wit and jazzy jams, says, hey, you know what? Never be afraid to be bold. Class of 2012, don't be afraid. But that resonates not just with students, that resonates with professionals, resonates with each other. You know what's radical? It's not being afraid, being bold. Sounds like a BlackBerry commercial, but it's true. I love that unconventional sense of being radical. Because you're going to be portrayed that way. You're going to be looked at, perceived as being kind of unconventional, kind of different, kind of strange. Nothing wrong with being portrayed that way, perceived that way. You know what this guy did? He threw a bunch of paint on a canvas, and now what do? We look at his stuff in museums, and we pay lots of dough for lots of paint on the canvas. You're welcome, Dana, by the way, for that. I did that for you. But that's Jackson Pollock. He might not have been understood at the time, but now we love his art. We gaze at his art, and we love his art. We might not always understand it. So now take that to social and say, okay, I'm not necessarily always understanding someone. I'm not always feeling safe about what they're saying, but I'm going to think about what they're saying. I'm going to mull it over. I'm going to digest it a little bit. Who likes the status quo? Right? We don't like the status quo, which is why we're hurling flowers at the status quo. But when I wrote that blog post, guess what happened? The status quo came calling. Truckloads of status quo. I got calls that said, hey, be quiet, you. Go back in your place. I got comments that said, no, be quiet, you. Go back in your place. You know what's radical? It's saying, okay, I'm going to respect and love and appreciate my friends who are working as agents of the status quo to this day, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to hurl flowers at them because I don't want to hurt them. I want to help them because I understand the status quo. And you know what social media helps us do? It helps us blow the hell out of that status quo. Right? Any grad students in here think they want to change the world? You're way too quiet. Any grad students in here think they want to change the world? Right? Yeah. Throw some flowers at it. My friend Pete says on Twitter, on his blog actually, he says, you know what? Radicals are kind of outside the norm a little bit. They're outside the box. You know what the hell is the box? Don't even look at the box. You can poke the box if you want to, nudge the box, but get out of the box. Don't even think about the box. And you know what the cool thing with social, blogs, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it, you get to invent what you would get to invent. You get to write what you want to write. You're tweeting that right now. Say something original. Just don't quote me. Make some stuff up, right? One of my favorite things about social is flat. We got any VPs in the room? Any senior student affairs officers? Yeah? Guess what? In this room, we're all the same. And on social, we're all the same, right? There's no hierarchy. Social eliminates that sense of hierarchy. Because guess what? In student affairs, we love hierarchy, right? We love chain of command. We love titles. And then we tell our students, don't embrace hierarchy. Go away from hierarchy. Well, with social, we're all the same, right? We're all even. You can tweet at Justin Bieber, and Justin Bieber can tweet right back at you. Yeah. And you can be totally okay with that. So let's talk about fear. This is one of my favorite quotes. And if you haven't noticed, I'm like super nerdy, right? Like hardcore, street art, science fiction nerdy. Yeah. And you'd be proud of it. Some of you are thinking, finally. Validation. Well, guess what? This quote comes from the movie Dune. Yeah. It's the kind of movie where you start it with your friends on Netflix and then you leave the room an hour later. Because you're not watching the whole thing, because it goes on forever. Yeah. Well, in the movie Dune, they talk about fear. They say, fear is the mind killer. Fear is the thing that just kills everything. It's the little death. Don't be afraid. People say to me all the time, like, you've got so many followers on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Are you afraid of what you say? And I say, you know what? I tweet about Yoda still. I tweet about coffee. I tweet about running. I tweet about my love of dubstep. Don't be afraid to be who you are on social media, and your world will light up. Your world will change immensely. So you're thinking, finally, I've been okay to tweet about Yoda. And you know what? You can. Or you're on Facebook and you say, well, I don't know if I should be friends with my students, or I don't know if I should. You know what? We're all on Facebook. And some of you are thinking, I don't want to be on Twitter, because you know what? People on Twitter, they only talk about the weather. And I'll say, you know what? What's the first thing you checked this morning when you woke up? That's right, the weather. Yeah, don't be so afraid of these things. Because I don't know what happened, but we talk about lifelong learning. Anybody talk about lifelong learning? Just make sure I can confirm that here. We talk about lifelong learning, and then what we do is we don't embrace dissonance. We say, oh, that's too hard, or there's some conflict there, or, you know what, I was an interpersonal guy growing up in University of Northern Iowa, so I love the nonverbals of this. And they're like, you know what, that's okay, because I feel your dissonance, and I feel your nonverbals, and I'm okay with it. We got to embrace dissonance. And you know what, social media is challenging, right? And it's radical. Some people say the word radical is just too harsh for me, right? Connotations of throwing grenades and whatnot. I say throw flowers. You know, radical isn't that big of a word. Dissonance isn't that big of a word. Embrace it. Hugging things is so much more fun than fighting with things. Anybody have a lot of money at their campus? Yeah, just way too much. You're like, I'm going to all these conferences, maybe 1 or 2 a month. Stay in the fancy hotel. I don't have to room with anybody. I know some of you are landlocked, right? Some of you can't get away, right? There's no money for funding. Well, the cool thing about social is social enables you to engage in alternative forms of professional development all the time. Learn from people who tweet. They share resources. Learn from people who blog. They share all kinds of stuff. Yes, I know I'm a blogger. Just patted myself on the back, broke my arm. But you know what? Learn from one another, engage in alternative forms of professional development via social, and that's radical. And I know our associations are freaking the hell out, right? They are losing their minds because they don't understand it. Conference like this, big ideas, is not sort of officially sanctioned, sort of. But you know what? That's okay. Alt Pro Dev, learn lots of cool stuff. We got some bloggers in the house. Who's a blogger in the house? Proudly bloggers, none of this like half-assed, my hand's barely up. Yeah, you know what? Learn from these folks. They're writing good things. Okay, we love our hats, right? Who wears too many of them on a daily basis? Yeah, he's got one on right now. He's like, this is actually the first one I've had on all day. We wear too many hats. And we proudly talk about our hats. Well, you know what? We don't have to. Let's be radical and say we're going to rewrite position descriptions. We're going to share with one another on social so that we don't have to work so hard, so we're not working 150% time. This guy wouldn't be wearing a hat right now if he wasn't overworked. You can tell, he's overworked. Yeah. Because you know what we don't do and we need to do more of is we need more time, right? Who has enough time? Anybody have enough time? Yeah, you're like, I got enough time. Yeah. Everybody wants to be her, right? Because she's got time. We all want more of it. Because you know what time gives us? Time gives us the opportunity to play. When was the last time we said, we're going to play? When was the last time we said, you know what, we're going to engage in a little bit of creative play so that we can learn new things? Because how do we learn new things? By having time to do it. People tell me all the time, I can't get into social media, I don't have time. And I'll say, you know what, build it into your job then. We're going to rewrite your position description, because unless it was put on stone tablets, some of you are thinking, well, actually, it's been a while. I haven't looked at it. It kind of blows some dust off. These things can be rewritten to say, I'm going to engage in communications and social media and learning as part of my job, and it's going to be like 15% of my time. I'm going to protect that time. I'm going to play in the sandbox of learning. We tell our students to learn stuff all the time, and yet at the end of the day, we don't have enough time. We got to get in that sandbox. And you know what? Wouldn't it be cool if your sandbox looked that neat? Yeah. Destroy some stuff. So the cool thing is I got this monitor here and it's telling me like how much time I've got. You know, we're about to go nuclear. So I've got one more piece of advice for you. It's sort of the biggest thing I can say to you, and I always sort of try to end my talks with this because I think in student affairs in general we've lost this sense. So please, at the end of the day, do this for me, and it will change your life. It's sort of a mantra, a way of thinking that's transformative. So please, be bold.